Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the final Essential series of the year. I hope you've enjoyed everything thus far. Really excited to bring this really special edition where we're going to be talking all about the legal realities behind what to do with your children, whether you are separated, whether you are using visas, all of these little intricacies, and we're going to hopefully show you some tips to have harmonious holidays. I'm just about to get brilliant speakers in. They're two fantastic legal experts from Forsters Law. We've got Amy and Christine. I'm going to bring them in now and they're going to share all of the top tips that you need to know. So, hello, Amy. Hello, Christine. How are you?
Hi, Lottie. We're good, thanks. Thank you for the intro.
Welcome, welcome. Before we get kicked off, could you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Christine Abbotts. I'm a senior associate and mediator in the family team at Forsters. Been at Forsters for nearly 10 years now. So I've done my time. We do a mixture of children work, which we'll be talking about today, and financial settlements, divorce, nuptial agreements, and a real range.
Hi, I'm Amy Sarraf. I'm a qualified barrister and I sit as a senior associate in the immigration team at Forsters. Our team moved from a previous firm, so we've been here for about a year now. We do all UK immigration, so anyone coming into the UK, so UK inbound work. We do all areas of UK immigration. We don't do refugee and asylum law, it's completely different. But our practice is split into two. So we have corporate work, so obviously when people want to come and work in the UK, and then we have private client work, which is what I predominantly do when families or individuals want to come to the UK. And most of our client base are high net worth, ultra high net worth and family offices. So it's quite a broad range of work.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, you're both really set up to cover this brilliant topic that we're going to be talking about today. And I guess let's just start with common issues. That's always a good place to start. What are the common issues that clients tend to bring to you in the run-up to the festive season? And which of these could be avoided with earlier planning? So we'll get an answer from both of you because you're coming at it from different angles, but it's both still relevant.
Sure. So I'd say from a family perspective, key issues about Christmas can often be to do with the children and agreeing where the children spend what lots of people view as the kind of key days of Christmas. So your Christmas days, Christmas Eve, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve can be contentious as well. So that can be a real flashpoint for some parents. Other issues actually as we come towards the end of the year are parents beginning to think about schooling applications, which won't be the focus of what we talk about today, but I am conscious quite a lot of schools will begin to have their applications closing around sort of March, April time, sometimes earlier. And so Christmas can be once, school finishes, everything's done, you've made it to the end, you begin to turn your mind to those points, and it can be when parents begin thinking about that. And I would say another point which often arises, which is a little bit of a frustration of mine, is that Christmas and the New Year can create a sort of false deadline in some clients' minds about some things. So I need this sorted by Christmas. I need this resolved before 2026. And actually, of course, it doesn't make any difference to anything if it bleeds in slightly into the new year. I understand psychologically for clients, it makes a difference. But it can mean that work becomes slightly more intense, or the focus slightly shifts towards rushing through things. Whereas I try to encourage clients to take time, make sure that they're comfortable with what they're proposing or agreeing. But it is often a theme. I think it's common across all disciplines. Christmas is just an artificial deadline in all sorts of people's minds. They want to exchange on properties before Christmas, all of that sort of thing. So those are probably the key things I see this time of year.
Yeah, and for you, Amy?
Yeah, so from an immigration standpoint, it's always travel. People either want to go home for Christmas or they want to travel to other countries and spend Christmas abroad. And often we see clients' passports have expired. If you're not British and you need to renew your passport in the UK and you have to go to your embassy, it can be quite convoluted and it can take months. So we often see that happen. Another thing we see happening is people want to visit different countries. So they're not going home, but they want to go to other countries and they don't always realize they need a visa for that country. So we see that happening a lot. Also, so if you submit an immigration application in the UK, so everything else, not nationality is fine, but if you submit anything else in the UK and you don't have a decision on your visa, you can't travel. You can travel. If you travel, you're going to withdraw your application. So we always say to clients, if you're going to submit an application near Christmas and you want to travel, make sure you either pay for some kind of priority processing or you wait until after Christmas, or otherwise they can't travel. But I guess my advice is preparation is key. Make sure you check your passports, make sure that they're valid and they haven't expired. You'd be surprised how many people have expired passports and they don't realize. And make sure, if you're booking Christmas travel, make sure you check the visa requirements for any country that you're going to, because more often than not, you need some kind of permission.
Yeah, that's right. And I think as well, to touch on something that affects both sides of your disciplines, is this concept of abduction. So people can accidentally abduct their children potentially. So I think first of all, let's go with the definition of actually what abduction is and how this could accidentally happen.
Sure. So yeah, you could accidentally abduct. Abduction would be a parent or a person with custody of a child taking the child out of a jurisdiction or sending them out of this jurisdiction without the consent of everyone with parental responsibility for that child or the permission of the court to travel. So I suppose the potential would be you book a last-minute ski trip, the children are due to be with you, but you haven't actually told the other parent that you're intending to go abroad. And the other parent finds out, and because you have links with the country that you're skiing in, they think you intend to stay there and you're actually abducting the child. That's the sort of scenario that could develop, I suppose. But if we think about how to ensure that everyone feels they're being whiter than white with how they do travel with their children, ensuring that the jurisdictions to which you're travelling to are comfortable to let you in, back, or when you're leaving the UK that you can leave. We tend to talk about travelling with letters of consent from the other parent. So obviously ahead of any trip, you're telling them you're going, you've agreed it, but you could have a letter with you that confirms that the other person with parental responsibility, or if there are a number of people, all of those people confirm that they're content for you to travel, their contact details, the details of the trip, so that if you are challenged at any of the borders, you can provide that. Some clients have difficulties because they don't have the same name as their children. And so in those situations, copies of birth certificates, marriage certificates, whether it's your final order in divorce, those sorts of things. Some clients understandably can be anxious about traveling with originals, so you could just do copies, or your solicitor can create certified copies for you. So it's those little things that if you've just got a wallet of key documents when you're traveling, that we'd suggest you think about ahead of any trip.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really helpful. And again, it highlights how potentially you could just fall into that without really intending to. And I suppose this really segues nicely into what steps should you take when thinking about traveling with your child. I know you've mentioned getting your documents ready, proof of consent. Is there anything else that you would add to that?
I think I would just more heavily emphasize the advanced planning and really trying to think about the person that you're co-parenting with as being just as entitled to know what you're intending to do with your child. It can be really tricky, particularly where there are a lot of animosity, a lot of water under the bridge with some parental dynamics. But if, as and when you're putting plans together, trying to agree them as far in advance, knowing the dates that the children are going to be with you, and sharing the flight details, when the passport's going to be given to you, when you're going to be returning them, just so that everyone feels they have an understanding of what's planned. I think sometimes stepping into the other parent's shoes and thinking, well, how would I feel if actually my child came home and mentioned, oh, we're going skiing in the new year? And you think, I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. That's obviously very unsettling for any parent. So it can be really difficult. And in some situations, communication's really broken down. It has to go through solicitors, or you're in court proceedings, But ideally, once you're out the other side of some of those really difficult moments, being able to just think clearly that, what am I planning on doing? What do I need to do 3 months in advance to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible, and taking legal advice if you need to, because it is also worth bearing in mind that if you want to do a last minute trip, it's very hard to get any court applications dealt with. So if the other parent with parental responsibility doesn't agree and you want to make an application specifically to be able to travel, you need to do that quite a few weeks, if not months in advance, because it takes the court a long time to deal with those applications. So last minute things pretty tricky.
And also crossing the border. So Christine mentioned a wallet of documents, which we would agree with from an immigration standpoint, exactly the same. The only thing I'd add is that there should be an actual, so Christine mentioned a consent letter. If parents could travel with a consent letter, giving the other parent the consent to take the child abroad, but more strongly, if they could get an affidavit, that would be better, because I think we take for granted in the UK that often UK border let people in with a consent letter or with a birth certificate, sorry, but some countries are really strict and some countries don't even accept that. So just be prepared that crossing some borders might cause some issues.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes you can find out online or make inquiries about what their requirements are.
That's a really good point. And I think as well, if we talk about sort of child arrangement orders as well, we mentioned about how difficult it can be to go to the courts for anything when, obviously everyone is very busy at this time of year. How rigidly must parents adhere to it over Christmas? And is there room for flexibility, or, is this a set in stone sort of document for this time of year?
So yes, a court order is a court order. So if you don't follow it, you are breaching a court order. So advice would always be to follow what is in a court order. But obviously there is recognition that between two co-parents who actually are able to communicate well and agree that 4 o'clock drop off is not going to work because that's right in the middle of the carol service, can we make it 5:30? And say, yeah, of course, that's fine. Those sorts of things where you are by agreement tweaking, varying to make it through a Christmas period. But if the other party says no, it says 4, it should be 4, then really our advice is, well, that is what is in the court order. So ideally, flexibility is created through that positive co-parenting dynamic, maybe thinking about explaining the reasoning for why you're asking to make any changes so that everyone understands a bit of a clearer picture. We've got to make that journey down from my parents. It always takes over 3 hours. So could we just push it to that, rather than just, it's got to be 6 o'clock today? That's a challenging conversation if you don't give people a little bit more meat on the bones to really see why some changes might be needed. I think if you are, it goes to my earlier point, but if well in advance of Christmas you do know that you're going to need to make some changes, you try to agree it, but that cannot be agreed, then the remedy really would be to try to have to make an application for that holiday or that specific issue that had arisen. But ideally, it's not something that, the week before Christmas, you're going to be able to get that application in and have the court deal with it, really. So between parents, if you can.
Well, that's it. Communication is key, and that's where, if it is particularly emotional time of year, that's when it tends to all sort of fall apart and tensions rise, and children could almost become pawns at some point because sadly they do come between warring parents. But if communication between parents has broken down completely and it's just going to escalate if they do try and be rational, sadly, what's the safest and most legally sound way to manage these types of handovers or communication channels over the Christmas period?
Yeah, so I think if there's a sort of stages, aren't there, really? If well in advance or a few weeks before it's really clear that there are flashpoints, then it would be possible, even now on the 9th of December, to arrange some mediation. For example, I'm a mediator. There's lots of really great family mediators in it. And if it's clear that actually you can't communicate together, but if you were in a room or even with a shuttle mediator where a mediator goes between and they could speak with both of you, try and understand what the real issue is about Christmas or moving into the new year, you could see if you could make some headway with that and potentially reach a point where you've resolve that real issue right there. But if it's really about, look, we can't really see each other, everything is just, you know, we're going to create a tougher dynamic for the children if we are, you know, doing drop-offs at each other's houses and things, then I think it's often thinking about neutral settings, drop-offs, arrangements where you're not having to interact too much. So some of the things I was thinking around this time of year, you know, grandparent drop-offs, although sometimes grandparents do get dragged into a dispute, but if it's felt that would be a comfortable place for the drop-off, then that could work. Shops, the park, activities, you know, I'll take them to the carol concert, you pick them up afterwards, you know, those sorts of things, just to try and minimize the time that you're really having to spend with each other and to call in with each other. So I think that's the sort of thing I would encourage parents to be thinking about and putting in place now. And as I say, I would really commend mediation if people are already feeling we've just got no way through it, because sometimes it can really nip some of these things in the bud.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's making things as seamless and trying to be as harmonious as possible. So if you really can't bear to see your ex, then, you know, don't bring the children into it as much as you can, and try and do it for the benefit of the children. You know, you two are warring, don't bring the kids into it, make it as easy as you can. And obviously mediation or a third party is critical sometimes in order to make that happen. But let's go back onto immigration and what should families consider before relocating overseas. So this might be a prime time for anybody thinking of, actually, we're gonna have a change of temperature, perhaps. We love the winter lack of sun in London. What might they need to consider from that immigration perspective? Amy, I guess this is for you.
Yeah, sure. So there's lots of things to consider when relocating to any country. But I guess if you're thinking about relocating to the UK, whether it's temporary or permanently, you would need to consider housing, where you're going to live. You'd need to consider schooling if you had children. If you were coming here to work, where you're going to work, are you going to set up a business? Or do you just want to come here and stay here? I think when lots of people think about relocating to the UK, they often consider all these factors. Tax as well, sorry, is another point. But they often consider these factors, and they don't think necessarily about having to have a visa here. I think there's a misconception that lots of non-visa nationals, for example, US nationals, Canadians, Australians, sometimes they think that they can just come here and then sort the visa out once they get here, but that's not the case. They need to do the visa or their residence before they come to the UK. And often they plan all these things. They look into schools, they look into tax, they look at properties, and then they go, oh, actually we need an immigration permission. And it should really be the first port of call, because that will determine what you can do in the UK. But often it's left to the last minute. So I think if you are considering relocating to the UK, you'd have to look at what your visa options are. And that's where the UK has become quite a hostile environment at the moment. They've cut down a lot of immigration permissions. There's lots of visas that have gone now. But fortunately, the kind of work we do on our team, we're able to come up with quite creative solutions where people don't necessarily fit in an immigration category. And we're able to bring in lots of high net worths, ultra high net worths, to allow them to live here how they would like to. Obviously, a lot of them don't want to go to work. They have, different priorities, but we're able to craft solutions to bring them in. And we often do applications on a sort of discretionary basis, because lots of people don't fit into the rules anymore, especially since they removed the investor visa. But yeah, I'd definitely say one of the most important things is what's your permission going to be in the UK? Because it's not just I turn up to the border and then I can sort it out when I get there. Which is what a lot of our clients think. So, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that always. It's not like going into a job. How about for international families just spending Christmas in the UK? So they're popping over, seeing relatives. They potentially might have an extended stay. I'm not sure on actually what the visa windows are, etc. What would you say to anyone coming in for a holiday?
Sure. Again, make sure you've got the correct permission. Historically, if you were a visa national, meaning you needed a visa to visit the UK from your country, so Egypt, Yemen, for example, you would need a visa to come to the UK, you'd need a visit visa. Then there were non-visa nationals that didn't need visit visas. So like I said, your US nationals, Canadians, Australians, they could just come to the border and they could spend time in the UK. That's now changed. The UK government introduced the ETA, which is the Electronic Travel Authorization Scheme. I think most people know about it now, but we still get clients that don't know that this exists. So they have to get this permission now if you're from any country in the world, unless you have residence here, you're British, you're Irish. There's some exceptions. You need an ETA before you enter the UK. So making sure first that you have the correct permission, because most airline carriers will not allow you to board a plane overseas if you don't have the correct permission, because they get fined. And the last thing you want to do is, go to the airport with all your stuff ready for Christmas, going to visit your family, your children are excited, and you're refused. They won't allow you to go on the plane. So make sure you've got the correct permission. Like I said, make sure you've got your ETA if it's an ETA that you need. If you are from a visa national country, then make sure you've got your visit visa. And they typically take about 3 months to prepare and process. You can do them much quicker. You can do them in a few weeks, but with processing times and gathering documents, they're very document-heavy applications. Make sure that you're prepared for that. If you're coming to the UK and you're coming here to work, that's another sort of contentious point, because you can technically work remotely. That's something that the government changed in the last year or so. However, it has to be a secondary purpose for your visit to the UK. So you can't come here to work remotely. But if you were coming here to visit family, then they say that you can as an additional activity. So I think make sure that you're fully prepared and make sure that your permission to enter is in order.
And what about anyone if they accidentally breach the conditions over the holidays? So they've had an extended stay, or they do remote work sort of accidentally, something their friends like, oh, can you just help me on this? You're around, whatever, or family visits. What happens then?
If you overstay, if we often see people, they come here and they might become unwell and then they may overstay. Make sure you seek legal advice so that you don't breach your conditions, because if you do overstay in the UK and you become an overstayer, obviously you're subject to deportation, and then at that point you're an illegal migrant. You don't want to ever get in that situation. So if something strange comes up, like you get unwell, then I would definitely say seek legal advice. If you are working remotely, like I said, it has to be secondary to what you're doing. I don't think if you entered the border and you told them you were coming here to work remotely, then they could refuse you. But if you were already in the UK, I don't think they would know if that's what you're doing. But obviously you are breaching what you're supposed to be doing. So just take caution and, be sensible. We also, so not just coming into the UK, we often see either our overseas migrants who are in the UK or British nationals. They go and travel and, like Christine mentioned, skiing, because obviously it's the peak season for skiing, and they go to the Schengen area. It's important for them to remember that they can only spend 90 days up to 180 days in the Schengen area, and that means all the countries together. So you couldn't spend 90 days in Italy and then 90 days in France. You've gone over. It's 90 days within the whole Schengen area. So we often get clients that think that they can go and stay in that zone for a lot longer than they can. So that's another important consideration when leaving the UK and going into the Schengen area.
That's a really good point, I guess, for anyone who wants a bit of an extended holiday and they think, I'm just going to go Euro tripping. You've got to stay within the parameters, even though it would be a very lovely trip. So going back to family dynamics, really. How should separated parents, co-parents, handle introducing new partners from both a legal and emotional perspective? Now, this can be quite a tricky one. And Christine, as a mediator, I'm sure you have lots of experience with these types of difficult conversations. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be a real flashpoint. It obviously can bring up a lot of feelings, lots of emotion, and in really difficult situations, it can be used as a bit of a tool to sort of needle the other parent, which is obviously not child focused. So from a legal standpoint, I mean, there's no law on introducing new partners, so that is not something that you would sort of be needing to check you were doing according to any particular statute or case law. But if you were to think about it in a child-focused way, which obviously we always encourage clients and the court would be expecting that you do, we would say done at the child's pace. And so, if the parents are newly separated, a child is just getting used to a new normal, then perhaps, enter stage right new partner isn't necessarily child focused, particularly maybe if that new partner has children of their own. It can create a real blended family. Hopefully longer term it would do, but I think we would say at a child's pace, and ideally you let the other parent know. I've definitely had cases where the other parent has asked to meet the new partner first, with a sense of sort of, there's going to be someone else spending a lot of time with my child. I would quite like to have met them and spoken to them in the right situation. That works really well. In other situations, it might just be, look, I've decided I'm going to introduce the girlfriend that you're already aware of to our children, so that, as sort of the example I gave earlier, when your child comes home from the weekend, oh, I met so and so, you're not thinking who, what, and all thrown. So it's sort of thinking about what's the impact going to be on your co-parenting dynamic, and also what's the impact going to be on your child. But you don't want the child to be feeling that perhaps it was a secret, something that they shouldn't be sharing, because that's not child focused, and risks the child's welfare, feeling that they're withholding information from one parent, etc., sort of inadvertently caught in a bit of a conflict. I would say, when I was reflecting on what we were going to be talking about today, whether Christmas is necessarily the right time to be thinking about those things. There's already so much going on, and it can take on a real significance to us. And of course, it's a really poignant, emotional time of year. But whether, and it's a case-by-case basis, adding on top of that the new partner meeting is necessarily the right thing to be doing. The answer would be yes, but for others, you say, yeah, why have I? Let's just do it in January. That's not a focus. So. Yeah, I would say it's that emotional side, which is much more case by case, the dynamics within any co-parenting relationship. But from a legal perspective, unfortunately, if you are desperate to step in and waive some case law, I couldn't find any. I'm very happy to be told I'm wrong, but I don't think there's anything you can do to stop it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's timing, and the impact on the children is, and should rightly so be a priority, especially, I think it's depending on their age and, how acrimonious maybe the relationship had been, and whether this is sort of a breath of fresh air, having a new person in the dynamic, all of these things. And as you say, it's case by case. But I guess for families who are newly separated, perhaps they've just separated this year, what guidance could you give them to navigate their first Christmas apart? So it's whether they're maybe just separated, they're still living together, maybe they're in different homes, maybe, there's different dynamics, and whether or not they have children as well, I suppose, is quite important to bring up.
I think if you are parents who are facing that first year separated, as you say, not every situation they've actually been able to move house. If funds don't allow, and maybe they're waiting for a property to sell or something, you are still in the same household, which can be really challenging. I think I would say to any client who's facing that to be kind to themselves, that divorce is known to be one of the most stressful things you're going to experience in your entire life. And Christmas is also very stressful. stressful. So you put those two things together, and you're just taking it day by day and being kind to yourself, and acknowledging what you're facing. I think for those who are really struggling, obviously get some support. We always recommend, fantastic therapists to clients if they feel they need it. Read online. There's so much content there now that people may find helpful to sort of navigate these kinds of things. If it is more about, how do we, decide the arrangements or those sorts of things, I think just trying to have a line of communication, talking about it early, and maybe just acknowledging that it's always probably going to be a bit of a rubbish Christmas if it is your first one separated and you're not in a good place, and actually maybe lowering the expectations because of that could be helpful, and knowing that good times are ahead and things will get better.
Definitely. I think that, that tinge of optimism is always helpful through, when you're in the eye of the storm, the chaos seems to be engulfing, but you will pass through eventually. But looking ahead, being a little bit more pragmatic now, what are some of the most effective legal tools or agreements that families can put in place to reduce festive friction, either from an immigration point of view and a family point of view? Hang on.
Sure. So the court has a no order principle when it comes to child arrangements, which means that you don't have to, when you separate, rush to court and get a court order setting out your child arrangements. The vast majority of people are able to agree the child arrangements between themselves. But what parents can find helpful is agreeing something called a parenting plan. It's not a legally binding document. It's something you can download any sorts of different templates online. But it can be something you speak about together when you separate, or you discuss through mediation. But a parenting plan would often record what your arrangements are going to be for Christmas. So lots of parents agree to alternate the kind of key days that I referenced earlier. Others prefer to do it slightly differently. If you're keen to have that skiing trip, you always want to block in that time, that sort of thing. So if you're able to, trying to agree a parenting plan that you will then be able to follow as the years progress. Sometimes they need refreshing. Children get older, they cope with different things, they want different things. So you might revisit it from time to time. But I think a parenting plan is a really good place to start if you're wanting to feel like you have the kind of framework that you're both working to going forward. And as I say, discussing that in mediation if you really do hit a blocker. But if you're unable to agree the arrangements at all, then go and see a solicitor and talk about whether you actually need to be making an application to the court for the child arrangements to be dealt with. As I say, it's a last resort. The court, doesn't want to be making orders about children, but that would be the sort of key legal tool that you have to fall back on if you had to.
And I think from an immigration view, it's about having the right agreement in place if you're traveling. So if you are going overseas, if you're relocating, ensure that you've got the correct permission from the other parent, preferably in the form of an affidavit, because especially in the UK, the immigration authorities, they're very aware of child trafficking. So if a child comes to the border and they have a different surname, or the mother has a different surname to the children, or there's a step parent, they're very, very cautious, and that's where they'd want to see specific documents. So in order to sort of make sure you plan effectively and don't have those issues, make sure that you're like I say, you're prepared and you carry the right documents with you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, as we all know, and especially as you guys know from a legal background, documentation is key to a sane life, and making sure you have them to hand and they're all up to date and they're all nicely organized and everybody knows what's going on. Unfortunately, humans are not always like that, and that's why we all have jobs. But looking to give, as we wind down on this, one piece of advice, I guess, from both of you, that you wish every separated or international family knew before Christmas arrives, Christmas, New Year, this festive period. What's one takeaway you will give to anybody watching now or on the replay?
So I would say preparation is key. Make sure your passports are not expired. Make sure wherever you're going, you've got valid permission. Just make sure you prepare. And there's that saying, isn't there? Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So ensure that you're prepared.
I would say perspective is quite important. I think we've talked a lot about what an emotional time of year it is, how there can be poignancy attached to certain days and traditions, and I think actually clients can help themselves by trying to have some perspective, stepping back. It's only a couple of weeks. You will be in January before you know it, and there is so much other real quality time that you can spend with your children throughout the whole year, that drawing too much focus and what it can put you and inadvertently therefore your children through by focusing too much on what does boil down to, you know, some key dates. So if possible, I think that helps to keep clients a bit more sane and grounded by maintaining a bit of perspective.
I love that. Brilliant. So, you know, it's all about perspective, preparation, and patience over this festive time. So anybody watching this, if anything has resonated with you and you are feeling like you could do with a little conversation, perhaps with a mediator, perhaps with a barrister, do reach out if you do have any questions. I really hope that this has been helpful for everybody tuning in now and on the replay. Thank you so much, Amy and Christine, for sharing all of your knowledge with us. It's been really insightful, and happy Christmas or whatever festive holiday you are celebrating around these next couple of weeks. And I look forward to catching up with you all in the new year as we kick off the Essential series again. But yeah, thank you again, Amy and Christine of Forsters.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us. Thanks. Bye.